You need to calm down. I'm sick of your behavior. Every single day you're in trouble. If I get one more call from the principal, My mom screamed loudly enough for all the neighbors to hear. Mom, tone it down, I begged. Tone it down? You nincompoop. Do you think that it's free to send you to school? That I just have a bunch of money hidden somewhere and I don't mind wasting it on you? I buy you designer shoes and clothes so your friends don't make fun of you. You have all the books you need and an expensive Mac computer or whatever it's called. You show me no gratitude, she screamed even louder. Honey, calm down, my dad said, looking a bit afraid. My little sister sat in the corner quietly. You shut up. He's like this because of you. He didn't inherit this idiotic behavior from me. You made that boy stupid. And I'm sick of him, and you, she shouted and stormed up to her room. Before I continue my super dramatic story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss out on the daily drama. Thanks. Well, as you may have guessed from the conversation I just brought up, I was a bad kid. Also, my parents weren't in a good place. They were on the verge of a divorce, and that made me feel even worse. So I continued being a horrible kid at school. I'm not quite sure how exactly that was supposed to help the situation, but anyway, maybe I'm stupid like my mom said. That day, I'd gotten kicked out of 2 classes for being rude to the teachers. I told my French teacher, Miss Anderson, that she looked like a donkey on steroids. Everyone laughed. Then later that day, I told my math teacher, Mr. Lewis, that he smelled like a heap of elephant dung. I don't know why I did those things. I guess the attention felt awesome because all the other kids admired how brave I was. So after my principal received 2 reports about me that day, he called my mom, who became extremely angry. They decided that for the next few days, I'd have a detention. I'd also have to clean up the cafeteria after recess and lunch. I didn't mind though, I was used to their boring punishments. That was until my arch rival, Harvey, decided he was going to turn it into some sort of game. Hey, look at Cooper, guys. He's the new janitor. Let's make his job a little bit more exciting, he said. His friends gathered around me and started throwing trash on the floor. Clean that up, stupid. Oh, you're not going to say anything? You're not so funny now, are you, loser? Harvey said. I wanted to swear at him, but after my mom's outburst the night before, I decided it probably wouldn't be a good idea. We'd get into a fight and I'd probably get suspended. So I just picked up the garbage and smiled. I'm doing this now, but observe me very well because this is what your future is going to be like, I said. When I got home that afternoon, my parents were in another pointless argument. I sighed and went up to my room. After chilling out for about an hour, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it and it was my mom. Hey honey, I didn't get a call from the principal today. That's great. Sorry for losing it on you yesterday. I just want you to do better, she said. It's okay, Mom. Great, I'll come to pick you up after detention tomorrow. I thought that maybe if I tried a little harder to be a better person, she'd be less stressed and probably less angry at my dad. Maybe I could be the reason they stayed together. I made an effort to behave myself the next day, too. After detention, I walked out of the classroom and on my way outside, I heard some laughter coming from the math classroom. I thought it sounded like my mom, but what would she be doing there? I went outside to wait for her. I waited for a few minutes and then I saw her come out of the school. Hey, Cooper, she shouted. She looked extremely happy. My math teacher walked behind her and smiled. Bye, Sarah, he said. He looked like he was blushing. Bye, Roger, she replied. When we got into my mom's car, I had to ask her what all that was about. Why do you and my math teacher call each other by your first names? What were you doing in his classroom? What's going on? Why are you all happy? I asked. Whoa, calm down there, buddy. Roger and I are old friends from high school. We were just catching up. I heard you told him he smelled like elephant dung. He's not angry, but try to have some more respect, okay? Do you want pizza for dinner? She said, quickly changing the topic. Yeah, I sighed. The next day, I was determined to make Mr. Lewis' life hell. As soon as he walked through the classroom, I yelled, "Elephant dung!" He ignored me and began teaching his lesson. Why do we have to learn this stupid stuff anyway? This makes no sense, I said. He ignored me again. Then I started making paper planes and I threw them at his head while he wasn't looking. When he continued ignoring me, I started rolling my old papers into balls and threw them even harder. Even stupid Harvey joined. When the bell rang, he simply picked up his books and walked out the door. He had a sad expression on his face, which sort of made me feel a bit bad for what I had done. I went to detention again, but my mom wasn't there to pick me up. I hung out with my friends for a few hours after, and then I went home. When I got home, it was nearly 7 o'clock, and I thought my mom would be angry. Surprisingly, she wasn't. When I opened the door, she was standing there in a really tight, pretty dress. She had done her makeup and her hair was done differently. She was really beautiful. "Oh, you're just in time. I need you to watch your baby sisters. Your dad is not back yet, and I'm going on a date," she said. "A what?" I screamed. My eyes bulged out of my head. "A date. It's like a thing people go on to get to know each other. Romantically? You've never had one?" She laughed. I didn't know what to say. She put on a tall pair of high heels I didn't even know she had, then went to stand by the door nervously. After about 10 minutes, the doorbell rang. She opened the door quickly, and I gasped at who was standing there. It was Mr. Lewis, my math teacher. He had brought her a huge bouquet of roses. "Hello, darling," he said. She took the roses, and he kissed her on the cheek. "What the hell? Mom, you're going out with him? My elephant dung math teacher?" I said. I wanted to break something. "Now listen here, you little. Have some respect for Roger. Don't make me angry. Now go look after your sisters. Make sure they're in bed by 8. Oh, and put these flowers in some water. Good night," she said sternly. As she walked out with Mr. Lewis, he turned back and winked at me. It was a wink that said, "Aha, I'm getting you back for everything you did today, you awful little brat." This was why he said nothing to me earlier. He knew what he was going to do. Ugh, what am I going to do now? I thought. After I put my little sisters to bed, I stayed in the living room watching TV. The front door opened and my dad came in. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Hi, Dad. Where were you?" I asked. "I had a lot of work to finish up at the office. Where's Mom?" "She went on a date," I said while rolling my eyes. My dad looked devastated. "Okay, well, I hope she has a good time," he said, then walked up to his room looking like someone had just dropped a piano on his head. I felt sad for him, and it hurt to watch my parents' marriage fall apart like this. I had to help them stay together somehow. The first step would have to be to get rid of that awful elephant dung math teacher. But how? I really didn't know. The next few days were awful. My mom had a date with Mr. Lewis almost every night. My dad and I became sadder and sadder, but my mom was always happy. She made our favorite meals and always had something positive to say. She paid more attention to her appearance too. She always did her makeup and wore the nicest clothes. I continued getting into trouble at school and the principal kept calling, but she didn't seem to care anymore. I've got to figure something out, I thought. I decided that I'd talk to Mr. Lewis after math class. The next day, I did just that. But first, I was a perfect little angel in his class because I realized that I needed him on my side for this to work. I walked up to him after everyone had left the classroom. "Excuse me, can we talk?" I said. "Sure, bud. What's up?" he smirked. "It's about my mom." He smirked again. "Ah, the lovely Sarah." "Yes, well, the thing is, I don't want my parents to get a divorce. My dad really loves her, and we were a happy family until a few years ago. Things were getting better until you came into the picture. I've got 2 little sisters, and, well, I want them to grow up in a happy family. So I'm begging you, could you please stop seeing my mom?" I said, almost in tears. He looked serious for a while, and then he smirked again. "Okay, I understand, but I have some conditions first. You've got to do everything I ask you to do. You're going to have to be the best student in class. Your grades have to be perfect, nothing less than an A, and no more disrespect, no more throwing paper or making rude comments. You have to behave perfectly. You can't get in trouble in any other class either. No fights, suspensions, detentions, nothing. And if at any point you forget that, I'm going to go out with your mom again. I will cancel my date with her tonight to prove to you that I'm serious." Wow, this is really going to affect my street cred. Well, if school was a street, but I have no other choice, I thought. I agreed with him. We shook hands and I went home. That night, my mom stayed home and she watched a movie with my little sisters. My dad looked a little happier that she was home. The next day, Mr. Lewis was waiting for me by the door as soon as I arrived at school. "Remember our deal?" he said, then walked away. In class that day, I did everything he asked. He wanted me to rearrange the furniture, clean the blackboard, fix some charts, and tell everyone to be quiet. Surprisingly, they listened to me more than they listened to him. After I sat down, he began teaching, and I had to answer every single question he asked. I did so correctly. Everyone was surprised, and to be honest, I was too. I didn't know I was smart. For the next few weeks, I followed Mr. Lewis around everywhere. I carried his books, brought him coffee, and did anything else he asked me to do. My mom and dad started getting closer, so I decided I wouldn't stop. I just had to continue being the teacher's pet. My classmates found this hilarious, though. At first, they thought it was one of my antics, but after the third week, they began to lose respect for me. They talked to me like I was some nerd, and that all became worse after Harvey challenged me to a fight. "Hey, teacher's pet, you've become such a loser. You've got to prove yourself again, dweeb. Meet me on the basketball court after school so I can kick your butt," he said one day at lunch. "You know very well that you're no match for me. I can crush you in under a minute. Why are you acting so brave?" I growled. "Well, we'll see about that." I didn't know what to do. If I didn't show up, everyone would think I was a loser. If I showed up, Mr. Lewis would take my mom out that night, and all the progress my parents made would be thrown in the trash. So, as you guessed, I didn't show up for the fight, and everyone laughed at me the day after. "Hey, loser, I thought you said you could crush me in under a minute, but you were so scared you didn't even show up," Harvey and all his friends teased. I got up angrily and walked to Mr. Lewis' classroom to tell him the deal was off. I couldn't take it anymore. I had memorized his whole schedule, and I knew he didn't have a class, so I just barged into the room. What I saw there caused me to stand, frozen in shock. Right there, in front of the whiteboard, he was making out with the Spanish teacher. He was so engrossed in what he was doing that he didn't even hear me come in. I quickly took out my cell phone and snapped a picture. Then I ran all the way home. "Mom, look at this," I screamed. She ran towards me. "Look at what your darling Roger is doing," I said while showing her the picture. She looked sad for a while, then said, "Well, your dad and I are trying to work things out. Didn't I tell you? So it's okay if he does that. I don't mind." I was so relieved I could have cried. The next day, I threatened Mr. Lewis. I told him that if he didn't do everything I said, I'd show the picture to the principal and he could get fired for inappropriate conduct at work. So right now, I'm not the teacher's pet anymore. In fact, Roger is now the student's pet. My pet. It's great.
Hi, my name is Dolly, and I'm kind of having a hard time at school nowadays. Why? Because I called the police on my teacher, the cool guy every student likes. So my classmates are a bit mad at me. Well, not a bit mad, a lot mad. And I don't think they'll go back to liking me anytime soon if I have to be perfectly honest. Let me tell you all about how this happened and why I decided that the cops needed to get involved. I'm not a snitch or anything like that, but someone had to say something, you know? Anyhow, let's start from the very beginning. My school has always been kind of dull, if I have to be perfectly honest. It was boring and nothing exciting ever happened. No big rallies, no big parties being busted, no messy kids that got everyone in trouble. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. Sure, there were a few bad apples, and they went to the principal's office often, but that was it. Other than that, most of the kids there were super normal, and the teachers were all old and boring, nothing that would ever catch anyone's attention. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I liked it that way. I like my small town and my friends. I like the way everything seemed so sleepy and calm. It was pleasant and wholesome, just like my parents taught me life should be. You see, my dad is a minister and my mom is a vet, and they both are super kind and charitable people. They always try to find the best part of everyone they meet and believe with all their hearts that all people deserve a second chance. Yeah, that's super lovely, but it doesn't always work out that way because sometimes people mess up their whole lives and ruin other people in the process, and that's just not fair. So I have a straight moral compass and expect people not to cheat and do things that are against the law, you know? I prefer talking to those who are messing up most of the time, but my teacher stepped way over the line, and I couldn't let him get away with it. Everyone thought he was so perfect and cool. So none of the other teachers or even the principal were even going to realize what was going on unless someone spoke up. And that someone ended up being me. Yeah, I know it sounds like I'm a big snitch, but it's the first time I've called the cops on someone, I swear. Let me tell you a bit about this teacher. His name was Mr. Dickinson, and boy, he was cute. He was super young, like a few years older than the rest of us. I was a senior in high school, and he had just graduated from college. So he went straight from getting his certification to teaching his first class at our school. Mr. Dickinson was also wicked smart, and he was our math teacher. For the first time in what seemed like forever, my classmates actually seemed to think that math was cool. It was a nice change of pace, sure, but appearances can often fool you. Not everything that glitters is gold, right? Well, believe me when I say Mr. Dickinson wasn't gold. Since he was so young and handsome, everyone thought he was the coolest guy ever. I'm not going to lie, I sort of liked him at first too. He seemed so clever and funny, and I loved that he was pushing the kids to study hard. He always bonded really well with all the teenagers in my class, even with me. He didn't only teach us, he even hung out with us during lunch break. He hugged me a few times, and I really liked it. I might have had a little silly crush on him, but most of the girls did as well. How could we not? He was sort of dreamy, you know? Now, I'm sure you think that you already know what his crime was. Handsome, young, hugging female students. He sure was a perv, right? Wrong. Don't jump to conclusions. Believe me, there is far more than meets the eye to this story, so bear with me. So we all liked him and basically treated him as one of our own. He didn't only teach us, he even hung out with us during lunch break. Mr. Dickinson would come over to our table and eat his meal with us, laughing and joking around. When a teacher questioned him about it, he'd just say, "I'm making sure they're not getting into any trouble. It's best to be close to them and get their trust." His explanation usually had other adults not in agreement and let go of their questions. He had a really honest smile, so no one ever seemed too eager to doubt his true motivations. Our teacher would also banter with us and joke around with us. It was so much fun. I even caught him pulling a few pranks, and believe me, it was hilarious. He was the coolest adult we had ever met. But it seemed like under the surface, he was hiding ulterior motives. He was also amazingly good at motivating kids, but maybe a little rough about it. I still remember what he used to tell us every single day. "If you don't pay attention in class, you'll end up flipping burgers like a total loser," he'd tell a student who fell asleep during his lesson. Or if someone failed a test, he'd call them out in front of everyone and say, "With grades like this, you'll be such a failure. Imagine your future. Do you want to go to college or just become a stupid drug dealer?" I didn't know if speaking that way to us was good or bad, but it seemed to do the trick. Students started improving their grades massively when it came to math. The principal was delighted with Mr. Dickinson. Perhaps that's why no one raised a brow when this young teacher began hanging out more and more with his students. "It's just a way to reach them and get them to study harder," he explained to the staff, and everyone just believed him. Every single day, students would gather around his car so they could meet up after school and chat. They'd joke and mess around doing silly things. Sure, some teachers were kind of suspicious, but they couldn't deny that Mr. Dickinson's methods seemed to work really, really well. He was such a cool guy, and everyone seemed to love him. Even the parents approved of him. So yeah, the school's golden boy, right? Wrong again. Remember how I told you that my little town was kind of sleepy and boring and nothing really special ever happened? Well, a few weeks after Mr. Dickinson arrived at our high school, these big parties began to take place. The kids there got kind of rowdy and the police were even involved a few times. This was so strange, as it had never really happened before, so I knew something was up. But I liked this teacher so much that I didn't want to tie two and two together. I wanted him to be the cool, good guy I believed him to be. A few months after his arrival, though, I was forced to face the truth. I was leaving class one day when I heard a few friends speaking about this big party they had been planning for that very Friday. I wasn't planning on going, so I barely listened until I heard a word that shocked me. Illegal substances. Well, that wasn't the word they said, but you know what I'm talking about. I turned around and joined the conversation. My friend Sally was describing how she had been saving up to buy some pills to take to the party. I was stunned. Sally had never been that kind of girl, but she seemed super excited about it now. "Yeah, I have all my money saved up, so that won't be a problem. Are you guys bringing anything?" "Yeah, I think I'll take some as well. After all, now it's super easy to buy it," Jake, another student in my class, said happily. I was so confused. Why was it easier to buy the stuff like that now? Well, of course I had to go ahead and ask and ruin the opinion I had of my seemingly perfect teacher. Mr. Dickinson is the plug for most of us. Didn't you know? He offers good stuff at a really good price, too. He never tries to mess with the prices, which is so cool, Jake explained, and I gasped, shocked. Yeah, I mean, before it was so hard getting something to smoke or some pills, or they were super expensive. Now it's far easier. Mr. Dickinson is so cool. Mr. Dickinson even gave me some for free when we were hanging out. That's so great. I love that we have a plug, teacher, and a friend all in one, chimed in one of my other friends. Plus, he's really dreamy, isn't he? Sally added. I was stunned. I didn't think that was cool at all. Selling that kind of stuff seemed horrible to me, and there were so many students that had never tried it before. But since the teacher they admired sold it, they suddenly decided it was super cool. People like my friend Sally. So not only was this guy selling illegal substances, but he was pressuring my friends by making them think all the popular students were doing it. I had never smoked before in my life. Some of my friends did, and I knew it. But this was getting out of control. It was one thing for a few kids to do it, and another for the whole class to be thinking it was so cool all of a sudden. It was so messed up that a teacher we all trusted so much was selling his very students the stuff. I was furious. I couldn't decide what I should do about it. Honestly, it took me the longest time to decide what I should do about it. I tried to justify him a million times and pretend that maybe it wasn't so bad after all, but I knew that was a big lie I was telling myself. I finally realized I had to do something about it when I found out that not only was Mr. Dickinson selling that stuff, but actually going to the parties and smoking it with the students. He was a bad guy, not a cool teacher, and I needed to bring his crimes to light. I thought about going to the principal, but Mr. Dickinson was so well liked that maybe he wouldn't believe me. So instead, I decided to go to the police station. I explained what was going on, and I told them about the party that was going to take place on Friday. My teacher will be there, selling all that stuff and partying with his students. If you go there, you'll bust him doing it, I explained. And they agreed to work with me to catch him red-handed. I went to the party and bought some stuff from my teacher with money the police chief had given me. I was wearing a little camera on my dress, and he didn't even realize that he was being recorded. Well, seconds later, the police rushed inside and arrested him. I tried to pretend I didn't know anything about it, but somehow my classmates realized that I had been the one to rat him out. Why did you have to ruin everything for us? They screamed at me, and I didn't know what to reply. I mean, it was the right thing to do. Didn't they see it? You're such a snitch, Sally told me, and she hasn't spoken to me since. I hate the fact that I lost a good friend over this. So, yeah, everyone is super mad at me, and they blame me for losing their plug and the coolest teacher in school, all at once. My parents are proud of me, though, and I know I did the right thing, so I guess I'll just have to deal with the consequences of having a conscience. Thanks for watching. What would you have done if you were me? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos on the channel.
Damien, Harold, and I were best friends since we were toddlers. Our moms told us we met in the park one day, and since then, we've been inseparable. We all went to the same schools and tried to make sure that we took the same classes, too. In our second year of high school, we had the craziest adventure of our lives, and it all started in science class. But before I continue, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I don't want you to miss out on any more amazing stories. It was a Monday, the first day of school. We walked into the science laboratory after lunch and sat together. I hope Miss Smith is really teaching our class this year, Damien said. He was so excited. Yeah, I sure hope so. We haven't had a hot teacher in a while. They're all so plain looking. I need some eye candy. What do you think, Carlos? Harold chuckled while looking at me. I started daydreaming. Miss Smith was absolutely gorgeous, and she was part of the reason I chose science that year. But my happy thoughts didn't last for a very long time. My daydreams were cut short as a serious-looking old man walked through the door. Welcome to science class. I'm your teacher, Mr. Carter. You might have heard about me before. I'm the best teacher here. No one has ever failed my class. I've won so many awards and I've been offered jobs all over the planet, but I've chose to remain at this school to help you kids, he laughed. It was true. He was the most respected teacher at our school, and we should have felt honored to be in his class. But instead, we were just frustrated. Where's Miss Smith? Damien wailed. She's moved to Alaska. She got tired of you teenage boys fantasizing about her. Besides, I'm just as good looking, Mr. Carter smirked. We heard groans all over the classroom. The rest of the day flew by, and after school, we went back to my house to play video games. It was our only way to relax after such a disappointing day. Hey, Pipsqueaks, my older brother Jonathan said while interrupting our game and grabbing our bowl of snacks. How was school? He asked. We paused our game and grabbed my bowl of snacks back from him. School was going great until we found out that Mr. Carter is going to be our science teacher for the year, Harold groaned. Have you seen Miss Smith? I dreamt about her all summer long, only to be greeted by that old man and his lame jokes. I will never recover from this." "Mr. Carter?" Jonathan asked while looking worried. "Yeah, you know him? What's the matter?" I asked. "I don't know, that guy is weird. A few years ago, I was in his class. Everything was fine, really. He's a funny guy. But one day, my friend Yuri started failing assignments. Mr. Carter invited her over to his house for private tutoring. He said he really wanted to make sure that she passed his class and eventually her final exams, so she went," he said. Then he went silent and looked like he was staring into space. "And then?" I asked. "And then, well, Yuri was never the same. After only one night of tutoring, she aced every single exam and assignment after that. But she changed. She used to be a happy, bubbly soul, but when she came back to class, she seemed dull and lifeless. She had this cold, sad stare in her eyes. It was almost like she didn't even remember who I was. Maybe it's because you're such a loser," I laughed. The boys and I disregarded his story and continued our game. The next few weeks at school were quite ordinary. We continued our usual routine of school, home, and video games. Then, one day, Harold got one of his assignments back from Mr. Carter, who looked a bit angry. "Harold, you're putting no effort into your work. This is the 4th time I've had to give you an F. I think you owe me some sort of explanation," he said. "I guess I don't really understand this science stuff. I don't plan to do any of this after I leave school anyway. I'm going to be an architect. Besides, I only joined this class to stare at Miss Smith," Harold replied. "See me after class," Mr. Carter said coldly, and then walked away. After class, Damien and I waited outside for Harold. "This old bloke said I have to come over to his house for a private tutoring session. He says it'll make me pass and that if I don't come, there'll be serious consequences. But we plan to play games tonight. I'm going to kick your butt in FIFA 21 instead. Forget science," Harold said when he came outside. "I think you should just go. It's one night anyway. It'll be fine. We can play FIFA all weekend," I said. We managed to persuade him to go to Mr. Carter's house, completely forgetting the story my brother had told us a few nights before. So he went that night while Damien and I played video games at my house until my mom chased him away and sent me to bed. The next day, we spotted Harold in the hallway before class. "Hey man, what's up? How was your tutoring session?" Damien asked. "Fine," he said and walked away. "Fine?" I looked at Damien worriedly. Harold never gave one-word answers to anything. In fact, it was hard to get him to shut up. This was not like him at all. We followed him to English class and tried to continue talking to him. "Aren't you glad it's Friday? We get to relax all weekend, and you don't have to worry about stupid science," I laughed. "Science isn't stupid. It's a vital part of our lives. I wish you two would stop being so immature," he replied. We were flabbergasted. Words like immature weren't even part of Harold's vocabulary. In fact, Harold was the definition of immature. Who are you and what have you done with our friend?" Damien laughed and rolled his eyes. This would have been fine if he had snapped back to normal, but he didn't. For an entire week, all we got out of Harold were one-word responses and cold expressions. We tried to figure it out, but we couldn't. "Do you think your brother's story is true?" Damien asked while we were relaxing in his living room one evening. I laughed at it, but it seems that the same thing that happened to Jonathan's friend is happening to Harold. He really isn't himself. He's been avoiding us too, I replied. "I wonder what happens at that weird tutoring session. Maybe we should investigate," said Damien. We put our heads together and came up with a plan. Damien would fail all of his assignments and quizzes on purpose. Hopefully, Mr. Carter would set up one of his weird tutoring sessions and then we'd know what really happens. "But what if the same thing happens to me? How will you know what happened if I don't tell you?" Damien asked. "We'll set up a recording device and hide it in your clothes. While you're over there, I'll be able to listen to everything that's going on," I replied. We got to work the next week. Damien consistently failed everything while Harold aced every single exam. It took about a month, but Mr. Carter finally asked to speak to Damien after class and set up a tutoring session for that same evening. "This is it," I said to Damien as we went to his house that afternoon to prepare. I had already ordered the recording device and hooked it up to my phone and PC. When he was all ready to leave, he said, "I don't really know about this. I have a bad feeling and I'm really nervous." "Come on, don't be. We've worked very hard to get this far. Well, I mean, you failed everything and that wasn't hard work, but we have to find out what happened to Harold. We're doing this for him. And remember, I can hear everything. It'll be fine," I said. He looked like he felt reassured. "Now go quickly and I'll go home to monitor you on my PC," I said. We parted ways and I went home quickly. As soon as I got home, I went up to my room and began listening to Damien and Mr. Carter. I was just on time. I heard Damien knock on the door and I heard Mr. Carter come to open it. I pictured it all in my head as it was happening. "Thanks for coming, Damien. Come in. Here, have a seat. I've ordered some pizza so you can have a snack before we start," Mr. Carter said. Thanks. How long is it going to take?" Damien asked. "Not too long, don't worry," Mr. Carter replied. I heard 2 chairs being pulled out, so I assumed that they were now sitting down. It also sounded like Damien was chewing. This pizza is good," Damien said. The pig, I thought. Then I didn't hear him for a while. "Are you okay?" Mr. Carter said. "I just feel a bit drowsy," Damien replied. Then I heard a thud. After that, I heard some shuffling. Then I heard loud footsteps and grunting. It sounded like Damien was being carried down some steps. Finally, I heard a door open, and what I heard next terrified me. I heard several screams and pleads for help. "Let us out! We're hungry! Help us! Don't leave us here!" I heard another thud, and then there was silence. I didn't know what to do. Maybe I should have called the police right then, but for a few minutes, I was just shocked. I went to the kitchen, then ran back up to my room. I still heard nothing through the recording device. I dialed Damien's number, and he picked up right away. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" he said. "All the noises." "Well, you'll tell me all about it tomorrow," I said, and hung up, relieved that he was okay. The next day, I woke up to a screeching sound from my computer. Carlos, can you hear me?" It was Damien. "Listen, I'm in a basement in Mr. Carter's house. Harold is here too. Mr. Carter gave me some food that made me really drowsy, but before I knocked out, I saw some weird machines in his house. There were people in them. Well, I don't know if they were real people, they might be clones. I could have sworn I saw one that looked just like me. I'm so afraid. And Harold's gotten so skinny, he only throws some scraps of bread in here once in a while. This is crazy. You have to help us." Unfortunately, I could only listen, but I couldn't reply. I got ready quickly and went to school to see if Damien, well, his clone, was there. I bumped into him almost as soon as I walked in through the gate. "Damien," I said. "What?" it replied with the same cold stare that Harold had a few weeks ago. "You need to come with me, quickly. Just be quiet and run. It's an emergency," I said, and I grabbed his arm. Surprisingly, it ran with me all the way to my house. I brought it to my room, knocked it on its head, and tied it up. "Good, now stay there and be quiet," I said while taping its mouth shut. Then I went straight to the police station to report a kidnapping. At first, they laughed at my story, but then I played Damien's recording and they started to take me a bit more seriously. Because it was a school day, Mr. Carter was somewhere in class. We drove over to his house and broke the door open. I stared at all the odd bodies stored in huge glass containers filled with some kind of liquid. For a while, I was frozen. Then I remembered. "Harold, Damien, they're in the basement," I shouted. The police found the basement door and broke it open. When we looked inside, we could not believe it. There were at least 20 kids and even some adults in there. Damien and Harold ran out. "You did it, Carlos!" The policemen had to call for backup, and a few of them went to the school to arrest Mr. Carter. Several ambulances arrived to take away everyone. Harold and Damien were taken to the hospital, and I suddenly remembered that I had Damien's clone tied up in my room. I informed the policeman who went to get him. Everyone was completely confused, of course. How was a simple science teacher able to create such accurate clones? And if he had such a remarkable discovery, why did he choose to teach at a high school? Apparently, the clones' brains were programmed to be able to ace all his exams. It was almost like they were half human, half robot. But why would someone do all that work just to seem like a good teacher? It was all too weird. This case is still being investigated, and it has not been publicized. All of the clones have been captured and sent to a secure research laboratory. Damien, Harold, and I are regarded as heroes in our town now. We decided that we'd start a small business together after we leave high school because we want to be as far away from teachers and professors as possible. We don't trust them anymore.